Hit record. Hi, this is Erin Piper and Chris Holder and Neanda Andrews, and we are presenting our group case study presentation for our first project. Again, my name is Erin Piper, and I am currently an administrator and in my third year of administration, and I am from Trussville, Alabama.
My name is Chris Holder. I'm an 8th grade social studies teacher at Anniston Middle School, currently, getting ready to start my 13th year of teaching.
My name is Neanda Andrews. I'm currently a physical education teacher at Ola Elementary School, and this will be my 4th year as an educator, and I am enrolled in the EDS program. All right. After reviewing the data that was given to us for the project, and we came to step one. Step one is what parts of this data caught our attention. We saw that there was a lot of red. There was a lot of students that were not successful on the assessment, which was over 50% of the class. We also noticed that there was 4 students that were all red in each category for their for the assessment. They had red in each category. What also caught our attention was the students. They're struggling to answer the open-ended questions, and then the students are lacking proficiency in their math basic skills. Also, what caught our attention was that students were having problems with percents, or with finding percentage. And then we thought that shows a need just to go back and do some reteaching for those basic skills. So again, if you look at the chart there, the students failing, the multiple choice, it's 10%. The short answer was 50%. And then the open-ended question, which was a high number, as stated earlier, was that it was 79%. So those were the things that caught our attention as we looked at the data from the assessment.
All right, the second step that we did, we kind of looked at see what does the data tell us. And some of the things that we did notice was what the students are proficient with linear equations. So there was something that stuck from this unit. We did notice that more than half of the class has a 60 or a below average. If you look at the pie chart, you can see half of it is red. That's indicative of the fact that half of them, of the 14, had less than a 60. The green, which was 29%, they were above 70, and then the 21%, those are within the 60 range. They could kind of go either way. We noticed that overall student learning did not occur at the attended level. The data, though, will help with reteaching and kind of a grouping of students as kind of the low students, the medium, and the high students. So kind of, and the graph kind of shows what those groups would kind of look like. Obviously, that red group would have to be divided up even probably a little bit further as to not have too big of a group.
Yeah, this is a good starting point for intervention.
Yeah.
Okay, so we also look at what the data does not tell us. And a lot of these bullet points here are going to look at what we might not know about the instruction that took place. So we also want to ask, though, turn on the lights again. Okay, maybe not. I'll just get closer. We also want to look at, as the students were taking the test, what was their pacing like? Were some students rushed? Were some students given more time? If a student gets accommodations, were they given more time and maybe didn't use it? Or, so how consistent was the pacing for each individual student? In regards to instruction, we want to look at whether or not the lessons, the pacing of the lessons, were they rushed? Did they spend a great deal of time on the first few lessons, and then maybe the end of the unit, they didn't have as much time to spend on it? Were there any long breaks or maybe vacation days in there? And so there was a break in instruction. That's something we're not sure about. Were the students allowed to use a calculator? Were any accommodations used? Or, if accommodations were provided and maybe the students chose not to use them, that's something we're not sure about. Again, if they rushed through their assessment, maybe didn't take the time that they needed to. And then if there was several scores that were close to the 60% mark with different types of questions and different topics. And so we wondered if, for those being close, was it truly that they didn't understand the content, or did maybe they just make a simple error in their calculation? So those are all things that we, just by looking at the data, we're not sure of yet.
All right. All right, what good news is there to celebrate? We saw several things while looking at the data that was good news to celebrate with the new teacher and coming in and the students taking the assessment. Some of the things that we saw that were worthy of celebrating was that students, they were able to write and solve equations and exponents. They were capable of doing that by what the data showed. Also, we identified that students, they mastered the linear equations and identifying functions. There were some highlights there for on the assessment from what the students were able to do on those functions. Also, to celebrate data analysis, they were able to successfully analyze the data that they were given in the assessment, and then also doing those functions on the assessment, they were at 100%. So that was something that the teacher and the students could celebrate from just that assessment. And then lastly, the students, they did well on the linear expressions, and they also did well on the SAT easy questions. So those are all things that were worthy of celebration for that assessment for the students and the teacher. So just looking at these things with celebration for those good scores, but there is also some room to grow with some of the things that they did not do well on.
All right, some of the problems of practice that were suggested by the data. Some of the things we thought they could do is maybe provide some different strategies for instructions. Not sure how she originally introduced this material, but maybe there's some different ways when she goes back over it, she could do it. Also, one of the things is to identify some of the student learning styles, because anytime you've got more than one student, they're not going to learn the same way. Also, having a purposeful, intentional arrangement of the student groups. Like we looked earlier, there's kind of 3 different levels, but within those levels, probably break them down to even more as far as what they're grasping, what they're not grasping, and definitely using that data to group those students. So probably one of the first things that the teacher will need to do is to reteach using different teaching methods, hopefully based on student learning styles, and match those up so that the students can kind of, they'll be engaged a lot more since it kind of goes along with how they are. And then also, of course, using formative assessment during and after instruction, whether it's an exit slip, whether it's just a good old thumbs up, thumbs down, just nod your head, something like that, just to make sure that she's at least on the right path. Because that's something for a new teacher that's kind of hard to do, is they think assessment and they think, oh, it's got to be pencil and paper. I've got to grade it. I've got to give it back the next day. But really, it can be just something as easy as, an exit ticket on the way out the door that says yes or no. I know what we did today. So those are just kind of some ways to kind of help her out a little bit.
Great. So along with that, some other data that we would want to review, or if we were the teacher that we would want to review. And this would be, again, whether we are reteaching some of this content, or if for the next unit, we want to look at these students' previous scores or grades. A lot of these students could either be new to the school, new to the community, or maybe, just have some previous scores that we need to look at. So we can do that, whether those scores be standardized tests, they might be just some grades from last year. So any of that we want to look at, maybe to point out some weaknesses or strengths that we didn't know about. We definitely want to look at a student's IEP goals to make sure that we're hitting those goals and we're instructing them how they best need to be instructed. Benchmark scores, that's definitely going to help us with instruction. It's definitely going to help the teacher know a good starting point, or maybe know what the students haven't mastered yet. RTI information is going to be important. So we want to know if a student maybe has been on RTI in the past. They might have just rolled off RTI, but maybe they still need some supports, or maybe a student is in need of RTI supports. So again, that's going to highlight some weaknesses that we need to address in the instruction. And then state assessments. Those are not going to be the end all be all, but they will give us some good information on what our students can or can't do. So all of those things are important to consider.
All right, so what are our key conclusions after looking at the data? We've come up with an action plan after looking at the data and going through the steps. So we're going to gather previous math data, which is the standardized test scores, IEP goals, and RTI plans, which is what Piper just discussed in the previous slide. Gathering that previous math data, and then we're going to collaborate with the math coach or the special ed SPED department. Doing that collaboration will help with making sure that we're using the data correctly, making sure that we're able to get the right tools in place to be able to move forward. And then thirdly, we're going to identify the student learning styles to assist. We talked about learning styles earlier on in the presentation. The teacher needs to identify those particular students that have the different learning styles so that she can be able to meet them where they are with their learning styles and be able to reach each student. And then fourth, we're going to reteach. Based on what the data shows. So if the data says that this student needs help in this particular area, then that's where the reteaching will be done and utilizing those learning styles to assist. And then lastly, if retesting, we're going to analyze that new data to measure the progress. So it's an ongoing process. So we're going to use the data that we get from this test. And then as we reteach and continue, then we will assess formative assessment and continue to do those assessments until the students have met their goal.
All right. And then like it says on here, identify student learning styles to assist. Hopefully get an opportunity to introduce a lot more hands-on stuff for the students. I know that's a big thing, is they can actually reach out and touch it instead of just looking at a piece of paper. Also reteaching with a high % of red failures, using a lot of formative assessments, interventions, new strategies, focus on higher order of thinking to assist with the open-ended questions. I know you probably talk to any math teacher in the country and they'll say open-ended questions are the toughest thing, because they see that big old blank spot and they just kind of, their minds just blank out and they're just like, I'd rather do anything else than have to answer an open-ended question.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, if retesting, analyzing the new data to measure the progress and just kind of keep looking at it and keep kind of going back, looking at it, see where the strengths are, see where there's growth, see where there still is room for growth. And just kind of, it's kind of an ongoing cycle, just keep going through it.
I think the key is that if, we stated earlier that some of the basic math skills seem to be lacking. And so I think there's going to have to be some reteaching, whether it be reteaching some basic skills or reteaching just maybe something specific to this unit, but there's got to be some kind of backwards, motion in order to keep the kids going forward. So.
Right. That's the challenge with math, is that if you miss a step along the way,
Oh yeah,
you're going to be lost later on. So you've got to have that fundamental building blocks there.
And one thing I noticed was that students could, from this data, they could solve equations, but then they had trouble solving systems of equations. So if they've got some basic linear equations down, then that might be an easy reteaching thing, is that let's just take what we know and apply it to the system. So there's got to be some more instruction that goes on for sure.
Yeah.
All right.